Hello everybody, and welcome again to chesslecture.com. This is International Master David Vigorito, and today we are going to be looking at the Scotch opening for black again. This is part 2 of the Scotch. So once again we're going to go e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, d4, e takes d4, knight takes d4. I'm also going to make a quick mention of this move c3. It's called like the Goring Gambit or something like that. This might be popular at club level, but nobody really plays it at high level too much. And I'm going to show you the reason why. It's not that black gets some big advantage, but black has a way to decline the gambit with d5. This is a typical move in double king pawn games because when white has put a pawn on c3 because there's no knight c3 to hit the queen so quickly. So e takes d5, queen takes d5, cd, bishop g4, threatening to smash the pawns, bishop e2, bishop b4 check, knight c3, and now the reason that you don't see this line too much for white is this forcing sequence, bishop f3, queen to c4. We can't take queen takes d4 because if bishop takes c6 check, followed by queen takes d4, but this move, queen c4, is very annoying for white because white cannot castle. So typically white plays bishop takes c6 check, and after bc the best white has is queen e2, queen takes e2, king takes e2, when knight e7 is fine, and white can also play queen b3, and with a similar ending after queen b3, a b3. This ending is equal, but it's not dead drawn. There's still some play. Black is not better, it's really just equal. Statistically, black tends to win this position a lot more than white, but I believe that is due to black usually being higher rated, because not many strong players are going to play this way with white. So that's a very simple way to diffuse the gambit by declining it. So now we'll look again at the main move. Knight takes d4, and the move we've chosen, as explained in the first lecture, is bishop to c5. And last time we examined knight takes c6 here, which is very popular, and you have to have a good idea what to do against it. Now the main move here is bishop to e3. That's the other main line. But first we'll peek at knight f5, which looks like an annoying move because it attacks g7. And the theoretical recommendation, which is still quite good, is to play d5, very aggressive. And after knight g7, king f8, knight h5. If knight f5, we can take on e4, and after a trade of queens, this knight will be hanging on f5 to the bishop, so black will just gain more time. So after knight h5, black plays queen to h4, which threatens f2, and after knight g3, knight f6. Black is developing very rapidly. You might get a little nervous because your king seems like it's exposed and you're down a pawn, but in double king pawn games it's all about development and initiative. So after knight f6, white has a choice here. If e takes d5, then bishop g4 is very dangerous for white because rook e8 is coming very quickly. Knight d4 can come, for example, if like f3, rook e8. Bishop e2, knight d4. Black has a very strong initiative. Black's pieces are all out, and white still has pieces sleeping at home. Definitely worth a pawn or two. White can also play a more solid move, bishop b5, and the theoretical move here is knight g4, but I don't see anything wrong with knight takes e4, hitting f2, and if knight e4 de, black again has a lot of open lines, and isn't even down a pawn. And if castles, move knight e5 is interesting, threatening knight g4, because if something like queen takes d5, knight g4 threatens mate, and if h3, queen takes g3 is possible, with lots and lots of pieces attacking f2. Now, another way to play this is a little more solidly with d6 is also playable, but there's not really any reason to do it. But you can also play d6, and after knight g7, king h8, knight g3, queen to h4, knight g3, and knight f6. And the difference is there's no tension between pawns on these two squares. And I would say black has compensation for the pawn, but this isn't quite as aggressive. So knight f5 is really just kind of a surprise weapon, but it's really not a logical move. So we're also going to look at this move knight b3, which makes more sense. This is a solid move for white. And after bishop b6, a couple things you have to watch out for, like knight c3 to d5, hitting this bishop. Sometimes you play knight f6, you have to watch out for a pin, bishop g5, combined with knight d5. So you got to just be aware of these things, but none of it's too dangerous. So after bishop b6, white can play knight c3, and black normally will play d6 here. Queen f6 is also possible, which I will also show with a4 and a6 thrown in. You can play queen f6 and then like knight e7. You're attacking f2, so there's not time yet for knight d5. But the theoretical way of playing is d6, bishop e2, knight g to e7. Again, we're avoiding this pin, bishop g5. Now bishop g5 can simply be met by f6 and castles. So now with castles, and white has not thrown in a4, a6, so now it's a possibility of playing knight a4 to eat this bishop. But after f5, black has good play with some pressure on e4, quick development, even the possibility of playing f4 and like knight e5. Now, the other way for white to play this with knight b3 is to throw in a4. And here I recommend just playing a6. a5 is also possible. And after knight c3, black can play knight e7 or also queen f6. You can really play both ways, whether white plays a4 or not. So I'll give you an example here where the pawn's thrown in. This threatens mate, so queen e2, and now knight e7, and black is all set to castle, and then typical move would be like queen g6 and d6, trying for f5, and if white tries to force the play with knight d5, knight takes d, e takes d, knight e7, followed by d6, and possibly even queen e5, and it's a very solid position for black. So knight b3 isn't anything too scary. Just be a little careful about playing knight f6 too early and allowing a bishop g5 pin combined with knight d5. So now we'll look at the main move, bishop e3. Now this creates a threat, knight takes c6. So again, we're going to play queen f6, attacking d4. And now the main move is c3. I'm also going to show you a move that's, I meet from time to time in blitz because it's kind of a surprise weapon, and that's knight b5. White allows breaking up of his pawn structure in order to have some pressure against c7, but there's a recent game played by Grandmaster Hari Krishna with black that kind of makes this idea look silly. So we're going to do bishop e3, fe, and then we're going to throw in queen h4 check to create some weaknesses, g3, and now instead of taking on e4 and going into complications of taking on h1, and white will take on a8, we're simply going to retreat back to d8 and leave white with a bad pawn structure. So white kind of has to do something quickly here, otherwise black will simply develop with like knight f6, d6, chase this knight away at some point, and there's like this wonderful square on e5. So white plays queen g4 to attack g7, g6. G5 is also possible, but this game really made an impression on me, played by Hari Krishna. Queen f4 to attack c7 and try to pressure f7, d6, bishop to c4, so we're going to play knight e5, this wonderful square which attacks both the bishop and protects f7, and white castles because we can't take on c4 because of queen f7 main. But this is where there's this great move. Instead of trying to play something like queen e7 to protect f7, when white might try knight c3 to d5, and c6, we have to watch out for some kind of knight d6 check because of the pressure on f7. We simply play bishop h3, attacking the rook. And now we're all set to play queen d7 if white moves the rook, and white also has to watch out for this move g5, which could trap the queen. So white has to kind of continue going down the tunnel with bishop takes f7 check, and then we just do king d7. This looks scary, but black has this solid knight on e5, which kind of keeps everything together. And after king d7, knight c3, g5, white is already in dire straits, because where's this queen going to go? If the queen goes to f2, we play knight h6, hitting this bishop with the idea of going to g4, with fantastic positional compensation. Because of this e5 square, now suddenly black is the one that's starting to move quickly in development. So after g5, there are already problems here for white, and what was played in this Hare Krishna game was kind of a desperate queen takes e5, de, rook a d1, king e7, and now if white takes the queen with rook d8, black's really just up in exchange for nothing. So white tried to attack with knight d5 check, but then king f8 is very safe, because this bishop doesn't really have any important discoveries. So black won very easily after this. So look at this line, and this pretty much diffuses the whole knight b5 saga. So we'll go to the main move, which is c3. And now black plays knight g to e7, and white's main move is bishop c4. There's another plan here, which is kind of like a Catalan-style move with g3. White is hoping to just play bishop g2 and castle, and play f4, and make this queen look a little silly. So black strikes in the center right away with d5. And then after bishop to g2, the main theoretical move is d takes e4, which is fairly safe, but also a little boring. Instead, I like this plan to give black chances to play for an edge with bishop takes d4, cd, and now d takes e4. This comes up sometimes in the Scotch, where black just takes on d4 if he can isolate one of white's pawns. So after de, knight c3, castles, knight e4, queen g6. This square g6 is often a very good square for the queen, even in the other lines that we're going to look at, because it pressures both e4 and g2 when white hasn't fianchettoed. So now white castles, and black plays the move that he wants to play, even though it looks like a mistake at first, and that's bishop e6. Black wants to play this move because white has the two bishops, but black wants to get a nice grip on the d5 square to make up for it. So after bishop e6, with the idea of bishop d5, we're trying to leave black with a good knight against bad bishop. The only way to try to take advantage of this is knight c5 hitting b7, but then we simply just play bishop d5. And if white does knight takes b7, we do rook b8, knight c5, rook takes b2. And black is certainly okay, probably at least equal. So that's kind of a good solution to g3 on move 7, to play d5 followed by bishop takes d4. So back to the main move, which is bishop c4. And one reason for this move is that it's the most aggressive square, and if black plays knight e5, which we're going to play, white is hoping to gain back the time with a timely f4. And the main lines here are for black to play like knight e5, bishop e2, and try to play a quick d5. But we're going to play a plan with d6, which I think is kind of easier to understand and a little more solid. So first we're going to play queen g6, the typical move to pressure e4 and g2. And after castles, we're going to play d6. d5 is another move. The reason we don't take on e4 right away here is knight b5 is very annoying with the pressure on c7 and c5, and this just doesn't really work out for black, so it makes more sense to start to get developed first. So we're going to play d6, and now white has a few moves. White can play, the most natural move is knight d2 to protect the e-pawn now, but then after bishop h3, the pressure on g2, white would have to play bishop f3, which he really doesn't want to do because there's no more f4, and black can take this bishop whenever he wants. Probably wouldn't take it right away, but black can basically just grab the two bishops at any time. Now, white can also play like a gambit. gambit with bishop h5 here, which is very aggressive. And then we have to take this pawn. Queen takes e4. And after knight d2, there's a couple choices here. Queen d3 is very solid when white doesn't really have anything better than playing like bishop e2, queen g6, bishop h5. And the other thing we can do, which is unclear, is play queen h4 and get ready to retreat to f6. So this is a little speculative for white, but it is a reasonable idea, so don't just think that you're a pawn up for nothing. And white can also do this by playing king h1, planning to play f4, and again we should grab the pawn with queen takes e4. And after knight d2, queen g6 again. And if white tries knight b5, we just castle here. And after knight takes c7, rook b8, the position's about equal. Both sides have quick development. It looks like black's pawn structure is a little loose, but this tension between these two bishops means that black will end up probably taking on e3, or white will take on c5. And white also has to be a little careful of something like bishop h5. Now we can go to the f5 square, and white has to watch out for something like queen d7. This knight isn't really so threatening. White's going to have to take some time to get it out of there. So white can gambit the pawn in those ways, and the most solid move is to play f3, simply protecting the pawn and not giving up forever on the f4 plan. This also allows white to meet bishop h3 with rook f2, and then after white plays king h1, we'll have to retreat. So after f3, we just castle, and knight d2. We're going to play bishop to b6. And now there's another typical plan for black here, and this is the reason I like the d6 move, is now we're all set to try to play f5. For example, king h1, we'll just play f5, which equalizes very quickly. So white normally will play knight c4 here, and then after knight takes c4, bishop takes c4, black completes his development very easily with bishop e6. This is a key idea, which allows us to develop actively. And the reason for this is that knight takes e6 would meet bishop takes e3 check. So here, black is able to exploit this, and if bishop e6, just fe is very comfortable for black. And if white retreats with something like bishop e2, we're again going to play f5, fighting for the initiative. And all this is possible just because of this pin on this diagonal that allows black to reach an aggressive position. So that's all there really is what we're going to look at on the Scotch. You can see that all the lines are a little dangerous, but once you know what you're doing with black, it's really not so difficult. So the key ideas here are to play queen f6. I back up here. And very often a quick queen g6 to pressure both e4 and g2. And we're going to play d6 and try to get castled. And if there's not favorable simplifications, we're going to play like a prophylactic bishop b6. And after castling, very often we're going to aim for a quick f5. So it enables black to develop very naturally. So that concludes my coverage of the Scotch. Hope you enjoyed it. And we will see you next time on chesslecture.com.